Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Hey, Kate, how are you today?
I'm really, really good. How are you, Fahrusha? I tell you, today's been a day.
Yes, it has been quite an interesting day today. Today is, in fact, January 3rd, 2017. And we have a really unusual and interesting show today because we took a slight departure. Because of this is our holiday show, even though it's after the holiday. But we wanted to do something a little bit different. And I decided, a number of our guests, we've had, this is our 42nd show, by the way. And a number of our guests have been people who have talked about their personal experiences. And then we've had people on who study these experiences, the parapsychologists, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And I thought it would really be interesting to have a couple of our favorite guests, of our very favorite guests. All our guests have been quite good. But and talk about their particular unusual experiences, not that they've studied, but they've had themselves.
Right.
Okay. So I also wanted to mention that there are people out there, and I don't quite get this, who study this phenomena, these various phenomena that are out there. They study these things, and they have had no experiences themselves. And I have to wonder how they do it, how they keep that focus, having never had an experience. If I never had an experience, I think that it's possible I might be a skeptic,
Well, certainly.
Yeah. But let's introduce our very first guest of 2017, a wonderful, terrific man who has written a number of books and who has recently made his own movie called Third Eye Spies, which is the history of remote viewing. So I want to say, put your hands together.
All right, I will.
The clap, but we're not in a public arena. So, okay, Russell Targ, the wonderful physicist who worked on the remote viewing programs for the CIA and the DIA.
Good
Welcome,
afternoon.
Russell.
I'm very happy to be with you, Fahrusha.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Kate Valentine is
And
my
I say hi,
partner
too,
here.
because I know you've been on with us before, and it's great to speak to you again.
So, Russell, tell us, you had, when I asked you about this program, you told me about a very, very amazing precognitive and anxiety-filled dream that you had. And perhaps you would like to talk to us about that today, because you as I have mentioned, you're like this really famous name in remote viewing, but it's mostly been about others. You've talked to us about Pat Price and Ingo Swann and all the people who worked with you at the Stanford Research Institute. But now we're going to hear a psychic experience of yours.
Well, I wouldn't have gotten into psychic research. I wouldn't have bet my career if I hadn't had experiences. That is, I got into psychic abilities research professionally in 1972, and at that point I'd been a laser pioneer researcher for 15 years. But as a child, I had had all sorts of psychic experiences, and I was a child magician doing pretend magic. And then when I got to SRI, working for the CIA, it's as though the child magician got to do real magic every day for a living. So that was my reward for a early interest in magic, that when I got to SRI, I was able to propose investigations of psychic research with a great deal of confidence. As I told director of the CIA, head of the director, that I am confident this is going to work because I've seen it work. I'm not kidding you. This is going to be successful. And I could do that partly because we'd worked with the great Pat Price, and also because I had seen these things in my life. And in the book, I wrote a book talking about all the stuff we had done for the CIA for 20 years at SRI. I wrote a book called The Reality of ESP. And the most important thing I can tell you listeners is that psychic abilities are independent of time and independent of space. They're the most interesting thing I know about remote viewing. In addition, the most important thing I know is that we all have this ability. It's not a special ability. We all can make use of psychic abilities to enrich our life. But as a physicist, the most interesting thing I know is that the accuracy and the reliability are not at all degraded by increasing the distance between you and me. It's no harder for me to describe what's on your table in New York than it is for me to describe what's going on across the street in Palo Alto. And similarly, it's no harder to describe what's going to happen hours or days in the future than it is to see something contemporaneously. And for a physicist, this precognitive aspect is the most interesting part of psychic ability. That I'm pretty much retired now, and people always want me to do lectures or do demonstrations or do projects. But the thing that I'm most interested in as a physicist is how it is that we can know what happens in the future before it happens. So that's why I told you about this sort of interesting Christmas dream that I had. As
Cool.
How old were you when you had this dream?
No.
A child,
the dream about the dream that we're talking about, I had 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, very
Now, I've
recently.
had numerous precognitive dreams. And the deal with precognitive dreams is you don't get credit for them in the big book unless you tell something about it before it occurs.
Right.
Because people always have weird dreams, and then it comes true, and then you tell somebody, and a skeptic will say, well, how many dreams do you have that don't come true? And the discernment is the very important part of this. That is, a skillful dreamer or a skillful meditator will be able to tell the difference between an ordinary anxiety dream or a wish fulfillment dream as compared with one that doesn't contain things you're worried about. That you've got to separate out the anxiety dream from the precognitive dream. Precognitive dream is usually of unusual clarity and brilliance, and it must contain things that are not part of your ordinary life. For example, if I would dream about a fire engine parked in front of my house, and then I went out and I saw a fire engine, well, that would be moderately surprising. But you could say, well, how many times has there been a fire engine parked on your street? And I would say, once or twice, and that's too many. For a precognitive dream, the answer to how many times have you seen this thing has got to be never, or less than never,
Right.
or unbelievable. And I've had a few of those, and they're usually of unusual clarity and high strangeness. And the one that I just had was of unusual clarity and high strangeness and fit perfectly all my guidelines. So that's what I'd like to tell you about to start the year.
Well, that's great. That sounds like a very, very good way to start our year here at Shattered Reality Podcast.
I had this dream, and in the dream, I went to my Wells Fargo safe deposit box, which I go to like every second year. And in the dream, I took out my Swiss Army knife, which I always have, and I used it to take a rectangular silver plate off the wall. So in the dream, I took out my Swiss Army knife and unscrewed the silver plate from the wall of the bank building in my little secure area where the safe deposit boxes are. Now that's all.
The
That's
little
right.
special room, I guess. That little room they put you in.
So that's already
Okay.
pretty peculiar. But as I left the bank in my dream,
Yes.
I realized I had just stolen something from the bank, and I've got to get rid of it. So I thought in the dream, maybe I could throw this off the Golden Gate Bridge, because I'm sure it would sink. And I said, no, somebody might see me, or they have cameras there. I can't throw it off the Golden Gate Bridge. So I said, well, I could wrap it in a napkin and throw it in the trash barrel at McDonald's hamburger store. And I said, no, if I did that, my fingerprints would still be on it. And when they found the silver thing, they would trace it back to me. I've got to get the fingerprints off it. So I tried soap and water in the dream, and that didn't work. And I got the acetone nail polish remover, which is very good solvent, and that didn't work. And I went under the kitchen sink and got kitchen cleanser, and that didn't work. And while I was under the sink, I saw steel wool and scoured the silver, but there were always traces of fingerprints. And as I say this to you now, this reminds me of the scene from Hamlet, where Hamlet was trying to scrub the blood off of something. I don't know if you even have that right.
Yes, out them
Ouch.
And I wasn't able to. I was not. This is all in the dream. I did all this stuff. I was not able to scrub the fingerprints off the plate. And then I woke up in an anxiety dream,
Yes.
and I told my wife about it. I said I had a very unusual dream. It has many, many unusual parts. And I went through all of these different exercises, and she thought that certainly sounded unusual. And that was that. Had our coffee at 8 o'clock in the morning. I told my wife the story. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a FedEx package, skinny envelope from FedEx. Couldn't imagine what it was. I pulled it open, and inside the package was a very thin glass screen protector for my big cell phone. I have a Apple 6X, the largest cell phone from last year, and I know somebody who dropped it and broke it a couple of weeks ago. So I'm a very careful person, so I've never dropped a phone, but it's out there. I can see what happens if you drop a big phone, it breaks. So I ordered a screen protector, which is actually a very, very thin piece of what they call ballistic glass. And as I pulled that out of the package, there are a bunch of other little packets with it. And I read all the stuff because I could see that getting this skinny piece of glass on my screen is not so simple, because you only get one. Because it's sticky on one side and it's got to be perfectly placed. So I read all the material, and they said the most important thing is to not have fingerprints on it. And you've got to carefully scour the fingerprints. And we give you powder to put on this so that you can cut the grease and get them off. And then they use a solvent to get that off. And then we give you a special cloth to polish both your glass that you just bought and the screen, because essentially get the fingerprints off. But before you do that, you've got to watch our 6-minute video on exactly how to use these 3 packets to get the fingerprints off the screen and off the cloth. So I had this 15-minute seance about fingerprints in the middle of the afternoon. And of course, this piece of glass is exactly the size of the silver wall plate. The wall plate that I saw in my dream was like the metal cover you'd put over a light switch that you're no longer using. It's like a wall switch blank. Right. So it's exactly the size of this thing. So,
and I'm looking right here at my own iPhone 6X, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Now, I'm very queued up for this kind of precognitive thing, especially one that is so accurate and has so many moving parts, did not cross my mind that this related to my dream. I was totally wrapped up in the event, and then I got my wife, who has better visual acuity, to actually help me place this delicate little thing on my phone, and that all worked perfectly. And in the evening, I was reading a biography of the famous Russian psychic Wolf Messing. And in this biography, it told about his amazing precognitive dreams in addition to his telepathic ability. So it wasn't until like 8 hours later that it occurred to me that this whole thing was really the carrying out of a psychic dream. It's as though I was in the psychic bubble for a half a day. That I had the dream.
Yeah.
Then I had the fulfillment of the dream with all the fingerprint nonsense. And then 8 hours later, I read about Wolf Messing and his astonishing psychic performances. So that was my day before Christmas precognitive adventures. And it meets my requirements because I had no anxiety. This did not correspond to an anxiety dream. A skeptic might say, well, you did order the screen protector. So if the whole dream had been that I got a screen protector in the mail, and that corresponded to the wall plate, where you could say, well, you were waiting for your screen protector. Well, that happened not to be true, but that would be a reasonable thing to say. But the whole fingerprint seance was not part of what I was expecting.
Yeah.
So it's really the fingerprint frosting that makes this an amazing story.
Yes, it's quite entertaining and very interesting, and just shows you how some reasonably mundane things can show up precognitively in our dreams, as well as things of immense import, like a bomb hitting the house next door or something.
In my book, summarizing all of our research in Reality of ESP, I give a number of instances where I have dreams that are high strangeness dreams. So a 1 minute description of a dream like that is, I live in a wooden house with high ceilings, and I had a dream where I had a electric train running around the wainscoting above the wall and below the ceiling. So the electric train was running in a circle around my living room. So I thought that was pretty amazing. I don't have an electric train. There haven't been trains in this house for 40 years. So I told my wife about it. We've got no trains, a train running. So she said, what could that be? So I got my coffee, as I always do, and went into my study with a computer to see what's on the first page of the New York Times. And the first page of the New York Times has a story about the reconstruction of the elevated trains in Chicago, where I grew up. And on the front page of the paper, they had animated photographs of the elevated train running in a circle around what's called the loop. So I would have to say that my experience of seeing the trains running around the loop at 8 o'clock was the cause of my dream at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, I would say so. That's quite interesting. Do you, by the way, just for the thought, do you keep a dream journal? I mean, I try to.
Not.
Do you?
I don't keep it. I think I once did, but I've not. I don't do that. These are usually dreams on awaking, rather than, they talk about hypnagogic dreams or images you see when you go to sleep. The dreams I have are so-called hypnopompic dreams. So it's like the last dream I have this dream, and then I wake up, and usually have some coffee, and by that time my wife appears, and I share my dream with her.
Well, that's nice. That's a nice tradition.
But I don't keep records. I consider it important to discern the difference between an ordinary anxiety dream. I mean, I'm 82 years old, and I'm still having dreams about not being prepared for examinations. So I had a pretty mild life. The biggest trauma in my life is not being prepared for exams.
Huh. Well, that
pretty
can cause a
mild.
lot of anxiety. I have dreams sometimes about going out on stage without a piece of my costume or unprepared with lines for a play, that sort of a thing. So I know exactly what you mean by that.
I grew up in New York, and the subway, very popular subway posters, I dreamt that I was at the Met in my maiden form bra.
Yes, I have those kind of dreams exactly sometimes. Anyway, thank you for telling us this very, very interesting, actually 2 stories. And I want to give you the opportunity right now, Russell, to just tell us about your movie. And we've heard about the book, which is, I can vouch for, is a very excellent book because I own it. And also I've seen iterations of the movie twice. I don't know where you're at with it right now, but it's a wonderful historical.
We have a documentary called Third Eye Spies, which we hope will be released in the fall. As we finish the film, we recently cut it from director's cut of 2 hours to what they want to show in the theater, which is about 90 minutes. If you have an adventure film where Pauline is hanging by her fingernails from the wall or laying on the tracks, you can make that as long as you want. But if you've got a documentary, you got to keep it to around 90 minutes. So that's what we're just doing. We're cutting the film and leaving our children on the cutting room floor. It's very painful, but we're just about done with that.
Yes.
Now, if your listeners want to see a coming attraction of the film, that's available as a internet address. You can go to Third Eye Spies, one word, .com, and see the 4-minute coming attraction.
Well, we're going to put that in our little blog spot that goes with the Shattered Reality podcast recording. So if anybody wants to see your latest book, which is the Reality of ESP, or know about Third Eye Spies, we will have that up on our blog in conjunction with this interview. And thank you so very much, Russell, for being on Shattered Reality again. We hope to see you soon. I don't know if you're going to come to New Haven, Connecticut in the spring, but if you do, I expect to see you there.
What is happening in New Haven?
What's happening
You're in New York, aren't you?
I think that, yes, SSE is happening in New Haven in June. So maybe we'll get a chance to see you there.
Maybe we will. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I wish you a Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you and Patty, and
bye-bye.
So long for now.
Good to speak to you. Bye-bye.
We're here on Shattered Reality with Michael Grosso, who is the author of the wonderful book, The Man Who Could Fly, and several other books about psychic phenomena and philosophy. Do you want to give us a rundown of that, Michael, and what you're doing right now?
Well, actually, what I'm doing right now is very odd because I was invited out of the blue by an English publisher to republish the first book I ever wrote.
Really?
It's called The Final Choice, and the subtitle is Death or Enlightenment.
Uh-oh.
And the strange thing is that I think he picked it because when I wrote the book, it's sort of about the near-death experience and the psychic dimension of reality. But I wrote the book under the spell of a nuclear threat, Because at that time, it was just before Gorbachev, called for perestroika and all of that. There was an element of we need to transform our consciousness. And maybe it's even possible that we could have a global near-death experience. In fact, we might be forced into it in view of the threatening world that we're living in, that kind of an argument.
Sure.
But it's mostly, about parapsychology and consciousness and evolution. So what I'm doing right now is rewriting that book or revising it and bringing it up to date. And it's a very, very interesting experience to be going back and re-entering my thought world at that time. But it, oddly enough, the book is even may be more pertinent today than it was when I first published it several decades ago. Well, so that's what I'm up to.
We would be very interested when you do finish it and you do publish it. Perhaps you would like to come back and discuss it at that time.
I'd be delighted. And,
but how strange to go back and review yourself as an author several decades back.
Well, what I realized was that a lot of the ideas, some of the things I've been writing about lately and thinking about lately, I had already written about at great length in this book, and I had forgotten. I don't remember all the things that I've done. I never read anything once I've published it because I'm afraid I'm going to see something that I don't like, and I'll be just mortally embarrassed. But the other thing I've been doing is the thinking about what I call a taxonomy of mind-body interactions. I'm happy to talk with you a little bit about my, continuing interest in the sort of strange outer limit potentials of the human mind, but particularly I've been focusing on the mind-body interactions. The case of St. Joseph is the most spectacular case on record of levitation. He's not the only one. And what interests me there is how is it possible for consciousness to affect, suspend the most basic force of the universe, the glue of the universe, gravity.
Yeah.
That's a mind-blowing idea. So the other thing I've been doing is developing this taxonomy, going through the whole history, because I'm not doing it, as effectively as I'd like to, but trying to make lists of different kinds of psychophysical phenomena. I'm very interested in the aspect of that theme that has to do with health.
Yes.
And the role of the placebo, which is really magic in the middle of science, and scientists don't even want to admit it. Because the fact is that the mind is able to often have equal and even more astonishing effects than any physical treatments and pills and all that. And the records are there, but it's sort of concealed under this Latin term placebo, which means I please myself.
Well,
okay.
We try.
Yeah.
No, that's very interesting. And I read today on your Facebook post a little bit about what you were doing with that. And I would very much, as I had said before, we would like to have you back again when you do publish the book that you're doing, redoing for the English publisher. However, right this minute, this is a very special occasion today. This is our holiday show. And what we did was decide that some of the people who were mostly on talking about other people's experiences or their studies, as you did about St. Joseph, we thought we'd get in contact with a couple of our best former guests and ask them about their personal experiences and if they could supply one for a holiday show. And you so kindly responded with a wonderfully interesting Christmas experience that you had some years ago with oddly, and now this is going to become very synchronistic here, with a friend of yours, a female friend, a girlfriend of yours from the past. And when we put your show up on YouTube, this same person wrote a comment, found it on YouTube and wrote a comment, but was only her name. And so I did not have any further information to give you so that you could possibly reconnect with
yes,
this
I tried
young lady.
without any success, but maybe she'll tune into this. Maybe she'll hear this podcast eventually, and if so, get in touch with me, Francis.
Yes, or even if she writes a letter to shatteredrealitypodcast.com, if she writes a comment there, then I'll have her email address and can contact you with it. So, Francis,
if you're listening,
yes, don't be shy. Come on over.
It's a new year. It's time for a whole new start.
The water's just right here.
Right.
Anyway, so, Michael, if you don't mind, tell us your story.
Yeah, I will. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's any harm in me saying that the lady in this story is the same lady that got in touch with you.
Wow, that is synchronous.
So at any rate, this is a story about, I don't really understand it, but it's because it seems to involve either a wild, unbelievable coincidence or a mind, my mind or some greater mind that intervened in a physical way. And the story is about a certain Christmas Eve many years ago when Frances and I'm just going to say her name, there's no crime against that. We had gone to, we had a little quarrel, okay? We had a lover's quarrel, and it had to do, by the way, and this is the setting for the whole story. It was a terribly cold night. It was the coldest night of the year on record. Okay, that's the background of the story. And I didn't want to go to midnight mass. I wanted to go to mass in the morning. And my lady friend insisted that we go. And so that led to a little disagreement and a little quarrel. And by the time we got back to where we were going to spend the night, which was where I lived, my apartment, overlooking the Hudson River in Edgewater, New Jersey. By that time, we were sort of feeling rather grouchy toward each other. And when we got inside, it was very cold, very little heat. And instead of warming each other up cozily, as we might be very well disposed to do on a holiday and under any circumstances, we decided to stay apart and in fact, ended up sleeping in separate spaces. And I should also say, for the background of this story, part of my grumpiness was a kind of anti-religiosity and a kind of contempt I was feeling for the commercialization of Christmas. I was in a kind of a black mood in a way by the time I was by myself without my beautiful girlfriend close by. And I was, got down on a couch somewhere and threw coats and stuff over me, and we both went to sleep. Now, in the morning, Frances woke me up, and I looked up, and her face is all bright and shiny, and she's pointing at the corner of the apartment at this plant I had, this plant called, it's a Dracaena fragrans, a tropical plant. And she said, look, it flowered overnight. And I went over, and not only did I see it, but I realized the entire apartment was flooded with an incredible fragrance.
Yes, they are fragrant.
A tropical plant. And so there was Christmas Eve, and bitter cold, and a tropical plant had flowered in our apartment after our angry and disappointing Christmas Eve together. And we looked at each other, and it felt like, and the smell was just almost overwhelming. We looked at each other, and we just automatically reconnected and embraced. And for the rest of the holiday, it was wonderful. So what happened, I started to think about this and made me a little uneasy because I couldn't figure it out. And I decided to do a little research. So I used to live in the Bronx. So I went straight to the botanical gardens in the Bronx.
Yes.
I knew where the experts were about plant life. And this was still like, maybe a couple of weeks after Christmas, but they were open. And so I found my way to an interview with one of the women there and told her the story. And I said, what's going on? And she just looked at me and said, it's a miracle. It's impossible. It never happens.
Wow.
Tropical plants do not bloom in 0 temperature because that's how cold it was that night. It was unbelievably cold.
Wow.
So I went to other places. I looked it up. And I walked away with the feeling that something very, very extraordinary had happened. And I thought about the archetypal nature of time, symbolic time. Christmas Eve is a magical time.
Yes, it is.
And we were turned off. We were alienated from it. I was the main cause of it, of the alienation. I take full blame, full responsibility.
That's gallant of you, Michael.
Well, of course. But in the morning, it was as though some very benevolent intelligence decided to pull a fast one on both of us and bring us together in this most amazing and astonishing way. I've never forgotten the experience.
Sounds beautiful, really.
And either, when I think about it analytically, it may have been simply a coincidence, but it sounds not like an impossible coincidence, or maybe unconsciously we or I were the causal agency that caused the plant to flower, or some other agency outside, above us, outside of the whole. So, maybe some larger mind.
Your so-called higher selves, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, something. But, some kind of an intelligence operating. That's what it felt like to me, to teach us a lesson and give us a gift. It was a gift to have. How often do you get a gift like that on Christmas Eve?
Not often enough.
Yes, exactly. Not often enough.
No, that's really a lovely story.
That's my story. And I guess the story of mysterious PK on a Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow, yes. That's it could be considered psychokinesis for sure. Yes, PK.
Yeah, it could be. And, one never knows with these certain matters. I mean, it's just so improbable and so out of the ordinary.
Typical PK would be kind of something that you had intended. And apparently you hadn't intended it. Perhaps Frances had intended it, but we don't know because Frances has not divulged her email to us here.
Right. And the other thing is PK could occur unconsciously. In other words, we don't, I mean, that's the whole point about the paranormal. Most of the time it operates independently.
And sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and some benevolent person or being or whatever decided, you know what, here's a Merry Christmas to you, and just gave you a really nice gift.
Yes, yes. Like your guardian angel, perhaps, like that.
Yeah. That's a very lovely story.
It is.
Whatever the interpretation, it's enriching to recall it and to share it with other people, because it just makes life a little bit more interesting, a little bit more mysterious, and I don't see how that can be a harm.
No, I think that it's important to keep the magic in our lives, to believe in magic with a K, MAGICK, as opposed to stagecraft.
Oh, right, of course. It's a good distinction in the spelling.
But I also think we find that when these paranormal events occur, they stay with us. Like if you had several amaryllis that just happened to come to bloom that morning, it wouldn't have had the same impact. And I think that's what differentiates something like this from an ordinary event. So I'm sure something extraordinary had happened.
Well, I mean, I have had I've written a book about, I don't consider myself a psychic, but I've had a number of psychic experiences. And for a philosopher who is interested in this subject matter from an intellectual and scientific and philosophical point of view, I'm in a pretty good situation compared to most people, because I have had experiences of almost every single category of the paranormal, at least once or twice. I mean, I've had several truly extraordinary precognitive experiences. I've had a number of strange PK experiences. I think this one I just told counts. Another story, I managed somehow physically interact with a person on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and that's another story. So I've had a whole bunch of experiences, but they occur unexpectedly and rarely. Mm-hmm. The first one that I remember is I was a little boy, and I dreamt there was a kid in the block I never played with. Mm-hmm. And I had a dream that I was playing ball with him. I never played ball with him before. So that morning I get up, have breakfast, I shoot outside, and here's this kid that I never hang out with, and he says, "Want to play ball, Mike?"
Huh. That's great.
I still remember it, right? Because it was, as you say, it's so unusual. And so, yes, I've had a wide range, but thank goodness it doesn't happen that often.
Thank goodness, really? I kind of thrive on it myself. But
do you? Okay.
Yeah, well, in any case, just to wrap this up in two ways, I wanted to say that one of the premises of this show was to mention that many of the people who've been on who haven't been talking about their personal experiences, such as yourself when you were on about St. Joseph, we thought it would be a nice idea to get a few people on to see if they had psychic experiences. And I did mention, and Kate too, to Russell Targ, who had just been on before you, about how there are a few people out there who were researching some area of the paranormal, pretty much with at least 50% of their energy and interests, and have never had an experience. And I would have found that very difficult to keep up my own interest in the paranormal if I didn't have any experiences. So just wanted to wrap it up with, if you want to, mention a book, website, anything like that, Michael, right now? Because
I do have a blog, and I'm periodically publishing stuff there, and it's, what is it? It's on consciousnessunbound.blogspot.com. I think it's .com. Yeah, .com, right. And if anybody's interested, that's I welcome comments and conversation on that. I think I have to put up a sign. I don't have anything that says sign up or engage or comment.
I think you have to sign in to comment. I think I was about to make a comment a couple of weeks ago, and I wasn't on my main computer. I was on a handheld device, and I found that I was unable to sign in at that juncture. But I will go back. Furthermore, it will be put up on our Blogspot, our blog for Shattered Reality Podcast.com and shatteredrealitypodcast.wordpress.com. How to get that out? Gee. So
you could have done something easier, I think. But
thank you very much. Thank you, Michael.
By the way, I have to tell you guys, I love the Shattered Reality title. Does that attract people?
I would think so. We hoped so. That was the idea.
It's dramatic, and we need to have our realities shattered from time to time. So we be receptive to new realities. Very cool. Very cool.
Well, thanks so much, and we hope that you have the best New Year ever, Michael.
Yeah.
Guys, too, and I hope to be in touch with you.
Terrific.
Okay.
Take
hope
care.
to. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And now, bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello?
Hi. Is this our listener, Peter?
Maybe.
Yes.
Hi.
This is Fahrusha and
Kate Valentine here with you, Peter.
And we are here from Shattered Reality Podcast because you had gotten in touch with me and told me about a miraculous experience you had in San Diego. Would you like to tell us about it, Peter?
Sure. I don't know if it's miraculous.
Wow.
But it's true. And
out of the ordinary.
At least, yes, I would say that. I was traveling with my son, about 10 years old at the time, back about 1991, and we were going down coast of California. We'd just gone to Universal Studios, and we were driving down to San Diego. Got in pretty late, didn't have a room. Got a room at the Hotel del Coronado. And we checked in, and it was pretty late. We went to sleep. During the course of that night, I felt I was awakened. I felt I was dreaming at first. And I was awakened to looking at the television set. And it was completely dark. I don't know. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. And the TV set had an image of a woman on it. It appeared to be black and white. If I was forced, I would say the hair was light. And she was clearly in distress and asking me, or anybody, I guess, looking at the TV at the time, to help them. Thinking it might have been a dream, I sat up in bed. I saw my son sleeping in the other bed and realized he wasn't awakened by it. And it continued. While it was continuing, he was still sleeping. And so I had a lot of bravado because I had always heard that if, in fact, this is for lack of better words, a ghost, that it wouldn't harm me. So I wasn't afraid. I just couldn't understand it. So I got up and I went to the window and I looked out the window and saw nothing, but kind of was like making sure I was awake. Went to the door, looked in the peephole. I went back to the TV where this woman was still asking.
Really?
Didn't say a lot. Help me.
Really?
Help me. And repeated that over. I went around it. The TV was off. There were no lights on it. I went behind it and everything else. Put my hands all around. I was looking. And I just kept looking at this thing. And I might have responded something along the lines of, how? And it repeated itself. And it kept repeating itself to the point I just sat on the bed looking at her. And at some point, close to daybreak, it just stopped. And I laid there looking at the TV, staring at it. So when the sun was up, I got on the phone and I called downstairs and I said, listen, I just had an experience that I don't even want to explain. I'd like another room. And then he looked, and the guy told me at the desk, he said to me that someone had died in that room. And I was in what is known as the old wing, the first building of the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego. And and he said that I said, well, I had an experience, and I didn't even ask him whether this person had killed themselves or had been murdered. And in looking at the woman and rethinking back to the woman, I can only imagine a person exhibiting that much distress wouldn't have been trying to commit suicide. Apparently, it seemed that in some way she was begging for someone to prevent her murder.
Wow.
And it's something I never discussed because basically you don't get a lot of people thinking whatever you're saying, what you experience is true. But having no reason to not tell you everything exactly how it happened would just be insane of myself. So that's just what happened.
Well,
and
Peter,
I rarely have an opportunity to discuss it, and I want to thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for being a listener to Shattered Reality Podcast, and we hope that you will continue to listen. And your anonymity is been reasonably preserved by coming up only with the first name, so no worries there. But thank you so very much, and we really appreciate your listenership, Peter.
Well, it might be interesting to see if any other listeners want to look back into the directory of the Hotel del Coronado in 1991, search out for the Peters that registered there, and who knows, they might come up with who I am.
Yeah, they might, but unless it's a three-letter agency, I don't think anybody's going to go doing that.
Yeah, but
one last thing. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year
Happy
to
New
you,
Year to you
Peter.
too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you.
And
Thanks very much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, that was really interesting.
Yeah, Peter had quite a story there, and I'm so glad that he did get in touch with me, being a listener and hearing the things that we've been speaking about. And it fits so nicely in with the other two fellows with their experiences. So we had two experiences from guests and now an experience from a listener. And you wanted to invite people to...
Oh, yeah, I think it really helps a great deal. If the more we hear about, there's not many venues where you can say, look, this really peculiar thing happened to me. And, it wasn't bad, it wasn't good, it was peculiar. And I have nobody to tell it to or anybody to evaluate it. Was it a good experience, bad experience, silly experience? I don't know. But we'd really love to have you share it with us because, again, as I said to you during the break, sort of, so to speak, the more events like this that are brought out in the open, the less paranormal it becomes, the more normal it becomes. And that's when you may start getting enough data where these things will then seem to have at least a direction as to where they're coming from.
And more validity in the general public. Where, of course, years back, and I mean, I can't point to a particular period in history, but basically any time before the
scientific revolution, I think.
The
1700s,
1700s, 1800s, these things were considered to be the absolute truth. So
and normal
as well. But before we go, I have a couple of things to say.
Announcements.
And one thing is to thank George Filer of the Filer's Files for reprinting my blog spot, which was called
Evolution,
Extraterrestrial Evolution.
Yeah.
And he reprinted it on Filer's Files, and it has gotten a lot of positive feedback. Not only that, but I wanted to mention one of our other listeners whose name is Oberon Hedgeco, and just mention him, sort of shout out to him, because he sent such a nice holiday Christmas message to us, wishing us a happy holiday and saying how much he really liked our podcast and how he thought it was really tip-top and none better.
Well, thank you so much. That's nice to hear things
Yes,
like that.
it is.
It is. Sometimes you feel like you're just broadcasting into the ether and nobody's out there. And so it's great, especially positive feedback is always very, very appreciated.
Yes, it's really very appreciated. And we accept all kinds of feedback.
But we like positive,
We
though.
prefer the positive, or at
Yeah.
least the constructive,
Yeah.
not just the... and one thing to remember about this podcast is that it is conversational, because basically the only real criticism I've gotten on our different various venues is that we talk too. Well, hello, if you just want to hear the person, most of our guests are pretty famous, and there is stuff out there with just them talking continuously. This is not a podcast which somebody gives a speech. We are a conversational podcast. I also would like to thank our engineer Bill and another person who has been helping with our online issues, technical issues, and that's Jerry. And no last names mentioned here because not necessary. Jerry knows who he is and Bill knows who he is, but we thank them both intensely.
And they're both being watched, so
they're both being watched. Okay. And I believe that one of our next guests is going to be Ryan Sprague.
Okay.
And he has written a new book, which is very, very interesting. And I believe it's In the Skies. And I think I might have left out a word there, but I'm in the midst of reading it. I'm very positively impressed by it. And we're hoping to have him on next or next after that. But he's agreed, and we want to speak with him. And I'm sure you'll be loving to hear from him. And so now, Kate.
Yes, and Fahrusha.
Goodbye.
Well. No. We have to wish our listeners a happy New Year.
Absolutely.
And a healthy and a prosperous one. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. I'm trying to do the
like
the Spock fingers there. I haven't quite got it. There I go. There it goes on. I can only do it with one hand. The Spock fingers.
All right. Well, anyway, in memory of the good Dr.
Leonard
Spock.
Nimoy. Yes, indeed.
Yes. Okay. I guess it's time to
say goodbye
from Shattered Reality. Okay.